Good day, everybody. This is Morsels of a Thought, number 1808. Today, I am here on the 1808th day in a row. Hopefully, that I can give you morsels of a thought of wisdom. Hopefully, that we all learn the right things to do in our lives because knowing the right things to do is wisdom. And then actually taking the action, the magic action to do it is virtue. We are bringing more virtue into the world with morsels of a thought at a time. Wisdom from other people because I myself am not wise. So I'm simply reading to you what other people have to say through their experiences. What you're getting from me is a synopsis of what other people say. So I'm wise enough to bring you morsels of a thought, and I hope that we all have enough virtue to do the things we need to do. I hope I'm inspiring you. I hope to entertain you a little bit. I hope to impart some good wisdom, and I hope that we can educate the world and ourselves. So, it all started generations before I was born. My father's family, oh, by the way, we are reading, we are reading, we are reading off script. Never Follow the Crowd. Recipes for Success by Larry J. Namer, visionary founder of E Entertainment TV Network. He gave me permission to read this book, and I'm going to read from page 9. With so much importance placed on food and family, it is somewhat ironic that a lack of food and family was the reason I taught myself how to cook. Let me explain. Both of my parents worked, and like a lot of latchkey kids, there were times when I was left to fend for myself when it came to dinner. Around the age of 12, though, I grew tired of eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, so it was out of necessity that I taught myself how to cook. Initially, I started out small, fixing something that was easy to throw together, but as I got better at cooking, I dug into cookbooks to find more interesting and complex recipes, which I'd sometimes put my own touch on to make them even better. It wasn't long before I realized that cooking for myself wasn't a chore at all. It was actually therapeutic, and I found that I enjoyed it so much that I looked forward to cooking and experimenting in the kitchen. Fast forward to today, and I can cook just about anything, and often without a recipe. I can eat something in a restaurant and identify the flavors and ingredients and then recreate it at home. The first try is usually close, but the second attempt is spot on. On the third take, I'm usually tweaking the recipe in some way to improve or enhance the dish and make it my own. I enjoy it so much that cooking would be my full time career if it paid the bills, but it doesn't. So instead, I choose to cook because I want to, and it gives me pleasure to share the dishes I create with my family and friends. Life on West 29th Street wasn't just about food and family, though. It wasn't Disneyland by any stretch of the imagination, but we managed to have fun. When I walked out our front door, I didn't have to look very far to find friends or something to do. The kids on 29th Street grew up playing in the street, literally playing games in the street. Punchball, stickball, you name it, we did it. It was dangerous, sure, and several kids on our block did get hit by cars over the years. Thankfully, no one was seriously hurt. Kids today aren't allowed to play are blah, blah. Kids today aren't allowed to play in the streets, but this was a different time. Life was at a slower pace, and it was common for children to be unsupervised and have the freedom to explore and play in the street and anywhere else. In my younger years, I knew I had to stay close to home, but as I grew older, those boundaries expanded. I was about 10 years old when my friends and I were allowed to go to the beach without our parents. We lived right next to some old commercial buildings that were in the initial stages of being redeveloped. The buildings and auto repair shops were replaced with an A&P supermarket, which just so happened to be within walking distance of Gravesend Bay on one side and the Atlantic Ocean and the beach on the other. The surrounding neighborhood was a conglomeration of Jews, usually second generation from Europe, and Italian immigrants from the Lower East Side of Manhattan and African Americans. But as time went on, total neglect by city officials caused the neighborhood to fall from poor to worse. With each passing year, there was an increase of influx of folks from Puerto Rico, which changed the complexion of the neighborhood. This was a problem for some, but it didn't bother me at all. I was more interested in sports, and our youth teams were composed of a mix of ethnicities. Looking back, I'm grateful that I grew up in a mixed neighborhood, and I believe the experience shaped my desire to learn about other cultures and helped me feel comfortable in later years when I had the pleasure of visiting other countries. While they certainly aren't like the community I grew up in, I sometimes have to remind myself that New York City was a melting pot with a little bit of everything. Growing up in that melting pot taught me to respect different cultures and ethnicities, and it played a big role as I learned to how to navigate Russia, China, and the rest of the world. And to think this exposure got its start when I was playing sports with the kids in the neighborhood. We are reading Off Script, Never Follow the Crowd, Recipes for Success by Larry J. Namer. National bestseller. I credit my father. Wait, was I reading that? I credit my father with my love for sports. He actually grew up in the same neighborhood where he had made a name and reputation for himself as an athlete. During summer, I spent Saturdays and Sundays watching him pitch in the local softball leagues, and in the winter, he played football in the park by our house on Sundays. Football was truly a neighborhood favorite, and all the adults played. Some even played professional football. And when we were old enough, they let us kids join in. It wasn't the NFL, but I had the opportunity to play football with and against my dad, and I witnessed his passion and skill firsthand. He was good, and being big and strong as hell, he was built like a football player. As a matter of fact, my father dreamed of playing professional football, and I think he would have made it, but he tabled that dream to join the army when the war broke out. When he came back to the States, he had been injured, but it was a sacrifice he was willing to make. Patriotic and passionate, he considered it his duty to fight for his country. These were the influences I grew up with on West 29th Street. We didn't have everything, but we had everything we needed. At the time, we didn't know that we were poor or that we lived in a rough part of town. After all, we didn't have the internet or social media, so we had nothing to compare ourselves to. When you don't know what you're missing, you don't miss it. But we did know that we were rich in other ways. We had a close family, food to eat, and friends to play with. It wasn't until years later that I was exposed to a different way of life. While my home life shaped my childhood, my education and entry into the working world actually shaped my life in unbelievable ways, transitioning me from Larry Namer, the least likely to to Larry Namer, international media mogul. Wow. Chapter 2. Making friends, not war. It is not possible, by the way, it is probably 11 o'clock at night on the East Coast. It is not possible for me to look back on my childhood without thinking of my friends. To this day, they are still my strongest and longest friendships. We went to Mark Twain Junior High School in Brooklyn together. Coming from Coney Island, it would have been surprising for any of us to make it to Hollywood, but oddly enough, three of us ended up having prominent positions in the entertainment industry. Besides me, there was Stan Rogoff, who produced Lizzie McGuire for Disney, and Elliot Lurie, the most studious one in our group, who went to Rutgers even though his heart was always in music. Elliot formed a band called Looking Glass and wrote and sang the song Brandy. Still popular and played widely, Brandy is considered to be one of the top 50 summer songs of all time. The song was revitalized in the film Master of the Universe 2, and one of the characters in the movie declared it to be the greatest song ever on earth. Elliot went on to become the head of music for Fox. Now he tours solo, and of course, Brandy is the most requested tune. From Mark Twain, I went on to attend Stuyvesant, St- Stuyvesant High School in Manhattan, an all-boys school that was a 1.25-hour train ride from my home. At that 1.25-hour train ride from my home. At that time, junior high students had to test before an hour and 25 minute hour. No, 1.25 hour. At that time, junior high school. Oh boy. At that time, junior high students had to test before being admitted to Stuyvesant, and less than 1% of the students who applied were accepted. This wasn't important to me because I had no interest in going there. But after the son of one of my dad's friends got in, my dad was determined that I go there too. I wasn't a great student, but apparently I was accepted because I had a high IQ and lots of potential. While Stuyvesant was considered prestigious, I hated it and begged to transfer to Abraham Lincoln High School, where most of my friends from Coney Island and surrounding neighborhoods went. It was also around that time that I discovered girls, so being stuck in an all boys school didn't fit my social agenda. I'll be the first to admit that I used to hate girls, at least until something changed my thinking in about the sixth grade. I had been invited to a birthday party for my cousin Martin Namer. Initially, I didn't want to go, but my parents made me. It was there that we played party games, spin the bottle, and 7 minutes in heaven. In this case, heaven was a clothes closet, and I found myself there with Hillary, a girl who was a year older than me. So there I was in heaven with Hillary, and we kissed. My life was forever changed. I didn't want to go to an all boys school. To me, it wasn't a privilege to attend a prestigious school. No, it felt like punishment. Every day I was on the subway with fellow Mark Twain classmates, Robert Ismack and Louis Hart Handworker. Louis was the nephew of Nathan Handworker, the founder of Nathan's, the famous hot dog stand. I wasn't about to give in and kept on begging my parents until they finally relented, and in the middle of my sophomore year, I transferred to Lincoln. Lincoln served three surrounding areas as the primary public high school. Let's just say they were poor, moderately poor, and a group we thought of as the rich kids. not because they were wealthy, but because they weren't as poor as the rest of us. Remarkably, more Nobel Prize winners have graduated from Lincoln than any other school in America. And, like Mark Twain, Lincoln could boast some big names in the entertainment industry like Neil Diamond, Neil Sedaka, Lou Gossett Jr., The Tokens, Harvey Keitel, Mel Brooks, and Buddy Rich. Nobody really knows why so many from Lincoln had such fame, but we jokingly say there must have been something in the water. This is Larry Namer, Larry J. Namer, founder of E Entertainment, and he wrote Never Follow the Crowd. Off script recipes for success. The title is off script. If you can see that in the middle of the book, can you see that? There you go. Right there. Okay. All right. Like I said, it was during my junior and senior high school years that my greatest and longest lasting friendships were forged. My earliest best friend was Jimmy Doyle, an Irish American. In high school, my friend group was mainly from the football team, and I was closest to Al Smith, we called him Junior, and Frank Gibson, who were both African American. As a senior, I became very close with Andy Birdie and his family. Andy came from a military family. His dad was a colonel, and his brother Mike went to West Point. It was devastating when Mike died in Vietnam during Christmas. And it was devastating not just to Andy, but to all around him. It was also very pivotal in my world and political perceptions. I went to Mike's funeral in West Point and was surprised at how stoic everyone was. With a stiff upper lip, no one cried, and that seemed odd to me. While I tried to follow suit, I finally lost it during the rifle salute. This was during the Vietnam War, and I was pro war and frowned upon the protesters on college campuses. One day, Andy's dad and I were having a conversation, and he said something that opened my eyes. Suddenly, I could see what was going on beyond the rhetoric of saving us from communism. It was these conversations, which surprised me coming from Andy's dad, that made me rethink my ideas about our government, politicians, and America's role in the world. While Andy didn't make it through West Point, he did make the military his life, and his sons followed suit. Still friends, we've always been able to have civil discourse and discussions about controversial subjects like politics, wars, and foreign policy. Because of Andy and his family, I learned to examine things carefully and rationally instead of simply blindly accepting whatever I think or hear. Coming from a poor area, most of the kids in our neighborhood didn't go to college, so they were drafted. I knew many of them. My cousin Martin Namer was shot down in his helicopter in Vietnam and died. Robert, Alicia, and several other members of our high school football team also died in Vietnam. Eventually, I was drafted too. Surprisingly, it was my father who did everything he could to prevent that from happening. My dad was very patriotic and he was proud to fight for his country, but my war hero dad was not going to see his son die in a war that was being fought for reasons he did not understand. This wasn't World War II, where my dad fought alongside fellow Americans for a good cause. No, this war was different, very different. My dad didn't buy into the government line on why we were there, and he even told me he would send me to Canada before he would let me get drafted to go to Vietnam. Instead, he took a second job working in a candy store so he could either pay for me to go for draft counseling or help me leave the country. While it was controversial, his insistence reflected just how strongly he felt about sending his son into a battle that he didn't believe in. When my cousin Martin was killed, his resolve to keep me out of the army became even stronger. I did go for counseling when I failed to maintain a passing average in community college. I got drafted and was called for a physical at Fort Hamilton on the same day as my friend Ronnie Beljean, who also did not want to go and went through counseling. The day of our physical was something like a scene in a Woody Allen movie, and I had come prepared. As a kid, I'd had issues with my spine and had seen doctors about it. So I brought with me a letter from one of those doctors and the x rays he had taken. The night before the physical, Ronnie and I dropped mescaline. Remember, this was the 60s, and we were still reeling when we got to our physical, along with hundreds of young guys who couldn't avoid the draft. They made us all stripped naked, humiliated and vulnerable. We had to march through the physical exams. Thank goodness for the mescaline. They then proceeded to give us a form to fill out about our medical history, and I checked every box, stating I'd had just about every condition imaginable, as well as some that were beyond imagination altogether. From there, a doctor questioned me about all the illnesses I claimed to have had. I see you checked off that you have had a heart attack. I see you. I see you. I see you checked off that you have had a heart attack. Where were you hospitalized and when? I responded that I was too poor to go to a hospital, so I just stayed home and nursed myself back to good health. Ah, no, I see. You had cancer. Tell me about that. I told him I smoked cigarettes, and it says on the pack that smoking can cause lung cancer. The government wouldn't lie to me about that, would they? When he asked where and when I was treated, I told him I couldn't afford to get treatment for lung cancer either. For the second time, he shot me a disbelieving look. He then continued down my checklist: tuberculosis, bedwetting, wanting to kill my mother. I'm so sorry, Larry. Having suicidal thoughts, you name it. I left no stone. I left no stone unturned. I even figured out how to fail the hearing test and was deemed to be deaf in my right ear. I also proclaimed to be a homosexual, even though I never acted on it. Finally, I'm so sorry. I can't help it. I'm sorry. I'm not that sorry. It's pretty funny. Finally, the doctor made an observation. I see you really want to be a Marine, right? To which I responded, yes, give me a gun and let me kill. He wrote on my forms,